gang, welcome to your monthly art exploration video, and I thought that for this month we could have a look at colour. Now colour is like such a huge subject that I thought, well, maybe we could break it down into something a little smaller for this month and look specifically at warm colours and cool colours and how we can get really good use out of them for our projects. So I've got some techniques to share, but before I get into that, let's have a quick look at the colour wheel. We associate certain colours with certain temperatures, don't we? And some colour wheels even help us out as they mark the cool colours and the warm colours for us. So the cool colours are the greens through to the blue violets, and then the warm colours are those that go from the yellows to the red violets. But it gets a little bit more complex than that, because in each colour there's also cool colours and warm colour versions of that colour. So for example, let's just pick a green, and if you've got a green that's nearer to the yellow side, then we tend to call that a warm green, and if it's more towards the blue side, then we'll call it a cool green. So if you've heard people talk about cool reds and warm reds, or cool blues and warm blues, then that's what they're talking about. So why are cool and warm colours so much fun to play with, and why did I pick them for some exploration this month? Cool and warm colours are just really great ways of adding dimension and contrast to our projects. Now warm colours, they tend to pop off the page or the canvas, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself. And they will just look like they're in the forefront of any project, whereas cool colours, they tend to recede into the background. And this is really useful to know and really useful to use in our project work. But then the other aspect is that they're just really fabulous contrasts as well. So let's have a look at some examples of warm and cool colours in action, and then we'll get into some painting fun and do some for ourselves. Now in this project, the warm colours of the flowers just make them pop out of that cool coloured background, don't they? And you might look at this and think, well, there's a difference between the values of the colours, and when I'm talking about values, I'm talking about the lightness and the darkness of the colour. But there isn't really. The values here are pretty equal, and what's happening is that blue colour, because it's cooler than that yellow and the pink colour, it's receding into the background, and those warm colours are just popping out for us. And it's particularly noticeable when you look at the areas coloured on the white parts of this junk journal page. So let's reverse this and see what happens in this flower, where I've used a cool colour flower on a warm background. Now the background is still jumping out at us and framing that flower, but the cool colour, well, it's kind of drawing us into it, isn't it? And these are both very striking contrasts, these two projects. So let's have a look at something where the contrast isn't quite as striking, but you've still got it there, and see how we can use that. So in these two pages, there's a lot of warm colours on this page. So they're mostly warm colours, and they've got neutral white focal points and some neutral white details on there as well. Then there are cool colours, and these just add a great contrast to make the page more dynamic and draw the eye around the page. And they also add dimension to the page as well. Okay, let's go super subtle for our last in-action sample. Now have a look at this one. What is the predominant temperature of this piece? Pause the video if you want to have a think about it. Would you say that it's cool, with those cool denim blues? I would definitely go with cool on this piece. So how have I used warm colours on this piece? And there are a few places that I've used it, so again, pause the video if you want to have a really good look and some time to think about it. So one place that I've used warm colours is with that gold paint, and it adds a lovely subtle contrast to the cool blues. But the biggest place I have used it is with the pink tinted gesso. And that warm tinted gesso is a layer peeking through the denim, and it's also behind that die cut doily. And you'll also find it highlighting the words on the page too. Now there's a video on how I made this page, so if you've missed that, it's over on my YouTube channel and I'll link it up below this video. But it kind of shows you that you can even use just the smallest touches to bring harmony to a page, to bring interest and just add some contrast and dynamics to a page as well. So are you ready to have a go at this? Let's put these theories into practice with some techniques that we can play with and you can use in your next project. Okay, so we're going to look at striking warm and cool colour contrasts first. So I'm just setting up two pieces of paper, with one with a cool coloured background and the other with a warm coloured background. And I'm using acrylic paint for all of these examples today, and I'm going to keep it really simple and use opaque colours over the top so that they block out the layer underneath. And here are the two examples side by side so you can really give them a good look. We have a great contrast going on here, but can you also see how the warm colours just pop out, where the cooler colours, they kind of draw us in or recede away from us? So they make really interesting focal points that draw the eye, or you can also try making them the background for more details on top and more layers. Have a play and see where you can take them. So that's kind of big statement stuff. What about adding some little details? And these kind of details are great for adding visual texture to a background. So let's have a look at how we can add these as little areas of contrast in a background, for instance. So in this little sample I've built up a warm coloured background with some dry brushing, and I've watered down some translucent yellow so that it can act like a glaze over the other colours. Then when that's all dry, I'm just adding spots of the cool colour contrast. And it really doesn't need very much at all, does it? And you've got a rich visual texture just from doing these small things. And the next sample is a similar type of effect, but this time I've used a cool coloured background, then added a couple of stripes of orange paint glaze, and over the top of that I've added some pen details in orange as well, and just look how effective that is. So that's other ways that you can use this type of effect to just make a difference to your work and add an interest to it. Okay, so for the last two examples I'm going to use warm and cool colours that are actually neighbours on the colour wheel for my contrast and dimension. So far the colours I've been using have been more distant from each other, separated by 2 or 3 other colours on the colour wheel, or even in some places they've been complementary colours where they're opposite to each other on the colour wheel, and these form some really great striking contrasts. But what happens if we use colours that are actually closer or even neighbours to each other on the colour wheel? Let's have a look. So for this one I'm using a blue, a Payne's grey, and a colour that on the tube says it's blue violet, which is supposed to be a cool colour, but really I'm looking at this and to me it looks more red violet, which is on the warm colour spectrum, so I'm going to go with red violet. So this background is going to be more of a mix of mostly cool colours with touches of slightly warmer colours, if that makes sense to you, I hope. But the overall effect of this is much more towards the cool spectrum. Now let's add in a red, and this is a very warm colour and it's very striking. Now red, red violet, blue violet and blue are all neighbours on the colour wheel. So I'm just going to use the red to tint some moulding paste and give it a good old mix before I use it over this background through a stencil. And I've let the background dry before I've added this stencil layer. And just look how beautiful and effective that is. And these colours are, as I said, they're neighbours on the colour wheel. So warm and cool colour contrasts, they don't have to mean complementary colours or, colours that are very separate on the colour wheel. They can actually be things that are closer together. And let's go with an old classic, using warm yellow and cool blue to give us that lovely green at the interface. And again, these three colours, they're all sat next to each other on the colour wheel as well. So thank you for exploring colour with me today. We only touched on a very small aspect of colour because there's a lot we could talk about, but I hope you had fun with it, and I also hope you have fun experimenting yourself. Now go and have a look at your work that you've already done and see where you've already been using warm and cool colours and what kind of effects you've been getting. It kind of changes your aspect, the way you look at these things when you start sort of exploring them in more detail. So I hope you have fun with that, and let me know how you get on. Also, I would love to see any of the work you do, so do link it up on the community page or also on social media. That's fine, just link me in so that I can find it. And of course, if you've got any questions, put them in the comments and I'll get back to you. So have a ton of fun exploring it, and I will see you next time.